Hi, my name is Katrina Plato, and this film is one lens that looks at the question of voluntary poverty. This film is a response, an artistic response, to a class assignment that I had in my doctoral program at Appalachian State University, where I was looking at social class stratification. During the course of this class, I went to St. Louis, Missouri, where I attended the 35th anniversary of the Karen House Catholic Worker Movement. That was started in 1977. I was a part of that community from the late 1980s through the mid-1990s. When I returned, I went and formed the question, how did class privilege, such as being white and educated, impact your decision to live in voluntary poverty? Most of us were white. Most of us were college educated. And so this felt like a compelling question to ask everyone. So the film is really my exploration of that question. But what it became was a look at three women in particular who were in the community with me and who were also happened to be the godmothers of my son Abraham Plato. So during my first visit to St. Louis, I was inspired to return for a second visit with my son Abraham, who's 20 years old and is white, middle class, and is going through his college education. I wanted to observe and witness what his response to the lifestyle of these women and the work of the Catholic worker would be as a white privileged male. So that's really where the focus of this film has evolved to. And again, it's one lens out of a number of beautiful, amazing conversations with the members of this community who have come to find that voluntary poverty is not sustainable, but that living in a balanced life of enoughness, as one of the members mentioned, is more sustainable. Thank you.
No matter what they do, things are gonna change someday soon.
I don't feel there's any point in trying to survive when people don't try to help me.
We share a community. We should all be engaged or involved in each other's well-being, you know.
Now every day that I walk out of my building, I see homeless people sleeping and chilling on the steps of the apartment that I live in. I'm not saying everyone's a victim, but the people that I live with treat them more like villains than actual citizens. I walk past a man laying in his own vomit. He gets his food and his garments by digging in the garbage. I beg your pardon, Mr. President, but I'm a resident, and since you've been to office, I haven't seen any evidence of things changing. We go into Iraq and attack, but we got people on the streets without a roof over their back. We've come to accept the homeless as part of our landscape. The money the government wastes could provide them with the same place to eat and sleep, but we cease to see that our own country is based around war, power, and greed. We got families on the street with nowhere to go, and the concrete's the only place they have to call home.
Nowhere to call your own. Out here in the cold, wishing you had a home, feeling you're all alone. Nowhere to call your own. Out here in the cold, wishing you had a home,
Yeah.
feeling all alone.
Now every face tells a different story, a different message. Now how can we judge the book when we don't know the beginning? We don't know what turned them to the bottle or started injecting. We just see dirty clothes and another bum begging. We don't see the kid who was an addict the second that his mom was pregnant, or the young girl who was raped and stripped of everything sacred, who now stands downtown walking on the block pacing, cause the only way she knows how to make it is getting naked. We don't want to face it, and it being the fact that the government created the ghetto and gave it crack to oppress immigrants and blacks and give them more of a setback. Like the last 500 years wasn't enough to accomplish that. Now look at the homeless rate and tell me to my face that race doesn't play an intricate part in your fate in the United States. Now think about your home and the place that you sleep, and the homeless who only had the concrete.
Nowhere to call your own. Out here in the cold, wishing you had a home, feeling you're all alone. Nowhere to call your own. Out here in the cold, wishing you had a home,
Yeah.
feeling all alone.
Now if you wanna see change, then throw your ones in the air. You think the system that we're living in is not fair? You wanna see change, then put your ones in the air. Now point them to the ground, cause change starts right there. You wanna see change, then put your ones in the air. You think the system that we're living in is not fair. You wanna see change and put your ones in the air. Now point them to yourself, cause change starts right there. Cause change starts right there, right there, right there, right there.
And we have a single woman who's pregnant and very due right away for delivering. Could she come stay with
Her
you?
parents had put her out.
Right. And she literally came to the apartment, went into labor.
She wasn't with us overnight.
She was not with us overnight and never came back to the apartment.
No.
And so,
But that's Karen.
all right, yeah. I think it was Virginia who finally just said, well, why don't we just name it after the first guest, Karen? And everybody goes,
Well, I got connected to the workers because I was living on Botanical with a woman I had been a telephone operator with named Beverly. And Beverly is like my friend. Is that how you say it? She introduced me to Thomas Merton, the Catholic worker, feminism, Zen Buddhism, political activism. This woman was like, and she is now a contemplative nun in Connecticut in Weekly. The four of us, and we always had sort of an emphasis on prayer being the basis of what we did. And that was real strong through the first years. And I have to always give credit that having nuns in the community from the beginning. Luann was a Franciscan, and then we had Marianne and Anne before the house opened. And their experience of commitment and formation in community and all of that, I think, really created the framework for us. And this is what we said were sort of our goals. It says, we hope to develop an atmosphere of prayer so that our actions will be a reflection of the radical gospel message. To share a sense of joy in life with others, to develop an affirming atmosphere for each individual, to strive to build a community that provides an alternative to present-day capitalistic system, to challenge one another to respond justly to ourselves and all creation through nonviolence, the works of mercy, voluntary poverty, and simplicity.
So you were Marxists?
I have to say, I feel that I failed more often than I succeeded. And maybe even we continue to fail more often than we succeed. But I still really like this. And I still think it's worth failing at.
It was part of my own growing up and my own understanding. I began to try to encourage people to listen more to guests and to spend more time and to think more. But I think that because we're with people whose needs are so huge and who really have nothing, that it's very easy for us to not be very supportive of one another.
And of the guests, frankly.
Well, and of the guests too, yeah.
And I thought, oh, you can stop. You can work and then you can stop. Now, I didn't really learn to do that for a long time. And so what you do is work stupid when you just keep working and you're not thinking and you're not really resting. So I worked stupid for years, but it was a real insight.
So my little part in this was I was doing a lot of spiritual direction and retreats, and that can get very, tunnel-y kind of. So I thought, oh, they're going to open that Karen house. I mean, they're going to open that Catholic worker. We'll go there. I'll go there and I'll spend a couple weeks and, well, sleeping on the floor, little creatures crawling over me, cleaning. And we didn't have a refrigerator. I remember Kathy Derby would cook pots of something. We must have had a stove. They were like big pots of stuff. And then we didn't have a refrigerator, so she'd stick it on the bookshelf. She'd put the pot on the bookshelf. The next day, she'd heat that stuff up again. And
but anyway, we went away to an all-day meeting. I don't know where, maybe at the White House, and decided when we were going to open, September 26th. And we came home. Marianne got home before us, and we walked in, and she said, "I just accepted some guests." When you were talking, it reminded me of another thing about community. We were always clear that community was necessary for the work, and it was so that was always a strong emphasis to us. And when we had some people with jobs and some not, we decided that all of the money went in one pot. I believe all of it did, and it covered. We did some tithing for charity and tithing for justice out of that, and then we covered some community expenses, and everyone got $20 a month for whatever. And I learned the mentality of the poor. Because you got that $20, you knew that $20 was not going to last a month no matter what you did. So we would go out and blow it and get the most fun out of it we could. I remember, who was it? Someone and I took our lawyer from a civil disobedience action out to eat, and he was like, "You can't take me out to eat." We said, "Hey, we got our $20. It's time to go blow it, you know?" I have ever since understood people who are not responsible with the little bit they've got, because that's the best decision to make. By the time Pat and Mark were here.
When I came in '83, it was people made a choice. They took part in the full economic sharing and got the. But it wasn't $20 at that point. You said how much you needed. I think it was 50 actually, and then there were others who weren't fully part of it, but just contributed monthly from their salary, but didn't ever take.
Right.
Because they had jobs. Yeah, so that's probably how you are now. And so that was the way it was already in '83.
And I remember in '86 when I came, after Katrina and I got married and started having kids and lived next door, I worked full time in the house, and I don't even remember how much it was, but I got a stipend from my work for the family. So it was still going on then, all the way through '93 when we left.
In the end, if we hadn't been naive and young, it wouldn't have happened. So
right.
It's all part of the journey.
I think it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had the passion for it. Right. I mean, the young and the naive, yeah, but a lot of us were young and naive, and we didn't have the passion for it.
Right.
And so that, to me, is what I see driving or drove you, your passion.
To tell you, you've not only marked our lives, you've marked the lives of our children. So many of our children, Catholic work group was what they still look at as one of the most important parts of their life. And I can imagine our life without all the models and the love that you all have shared to each other, with the community, and obviously with all the wonderful guests who've been here for all those 30-something years.
The Clearinghouse, the Catholic worker, found me at just the right time and literally changed the course of my life. I wouldn't be who I am. I wouldn't be interested in what I am. My vocation would be completely different. Thanks to Mark Schimmel and Tekka and Becky for coming to my freshman class at Webster University and asking us all to take house. And I was like, all right, why not, you know? I came from completely different backgrounds, and you know, this was my first exposure to any sort of thinking like this, any kind of spirituality that was sort of actualizing the world and lived out. My life doesn't look the same. So thank you guys for reading all.
Again, I wanted to say in community that I love you, Mark, just for people to hear that. And I want to say that now, I love you. Oh, this has been such a, you all and this place and this building and this community and the guests, Dorothy coming by, all that. It's been such a deeply transformative time that obviously stays with me. All of you, it's been wonderful. Thank you. I have to say that out loud.
It's a pleasure.
Peter Morin was a personalist, and he brought that vision to the movement of the Catholic worker, as he tries to bridge, in some ways, this idea that no, we are not individuals living for ourselves, and no, we are not a collective that has no freedom or personal value. But personalism looks at the human person as having inalienable rights, not rights is the wrong word, but dignity, undeniable dignity. That every person is sort of the face of God in each person. God is imprinted, God is alive in each person. And so one of the greatest personalists I've known is John Campbell. He just died, my very close friend who I loved more than life. And I'll never forget, I was in a class with him when I was about 20 years old, so right around your age. But I'll never forget, I'm sitting in John's class, and I had kind of been arguing with him for the first month or so of his class, he taught a class on the human person, and his vision was persons. And he talks a lot about sort of how culture caused us to see people's value in terms of their purchasing power or their relationship with things, in opposition to this view that culture has of a human person being just worth what they make, worth how they look, valued by all these things that are related to things. The person really could, you set up the personal form. And his vision for the ideal personal form, where the person could be a person, was Jesus. And he talked about Jesus rejecting the temptations for wealth and power, those temptations in the desert. And he said, so this to me is like the vision of God in us. And so if we see that, if we see with that light, it totally changes how we live our lives. If I see the face of God in you, I see myself in you, and I know that I cannot make it without you, or we are all one, it changes how we live our life. And so that to me is the heart of personalism. But I believe in that because I believe in God. Because I believe in meditation and prayer and letting go to love. And love flows through us so that I can better see you, so I can listen to you. We have this mantra that we do at Karen House. It's God, open my eyes to see you, open my ears to listen to you, open my heart to follow you. And it's, if for you it could be open my heart to the universe of goodness, of love, of intellect, of brilliance, of light. See, in the Christian sense, Christian person, it's seeing the possibility of God not rejecting us, but becoming love with us. And in that embodiment, us embodying us in this world, in this concrete way, and in our need for one another, our realization of our need for one another. And so the personalism then flows out into us for nonviolence, it flows into anti-war, it flows into living in not taking power, but sharing power and having others, equality, and equality in the sense of not everything equal, but each person having the fullness of the beauty of who they are.
I just feel like everyone just came at the time that, they needed to be there, and I didn't do a lot of picking and choosing about, I wonder if you should live at my house. It just, people don't, because, the truth is we're changed, by letting ourselves be vulnerable with other people. And anyway, it's, when I look back over the 10 years that I lived at my house, I'm just amazed at how all of the gifts that I got from doing that,
But then on the flip side, I actually do have a belief that the self should come before everything else. And the dangerous thing about that is people are like, oh, then I should go out and get a bunch of money and have fun and blah blah blah. But that's not really growth of the self. That's just very immediate satisfaction, wish fulfillment. And I think if you can truly understand what the self needs, then perfectly satisfying that is going to help everyone else. And when everyone is on that level and has the means to do that, then and this is where how much I love science comes back into it, I would be amazed by what the human race could achieve. Because the things that we have achieved, the internet and space travel and locomotion, etc., with such a tiny amount of the population really working on these problems, if the entire population were working perfectly in sync to sustain ourselves and to move in that direction, the things that we could get done would just be mind-blowing.
And maybe that's not assumed for someone who comes from a black family. I think that's where the privilege comes into it. It's just this assumption.
How was that brought home to you during this trip?
Meeting Dorothy was a pretty heavy thing.
Dorothy herself was very nice.
So what of visiting Dorothy made you want to cry?
Oh, just her determination, to get to a better place, because so many people don't. Powerful for me, because for me, this entire community is in a certain, relative to my middle-class upbringing, which did not feel nearly as middle class until I came here. This whole community is fairly impoverished, especially just meeting Carolyn. And she certainly doesn't live uncomfortably, but she does live, you know, in run-down housing, very makeshift, which is purposefully done. And it was just interesting to come to this house and have all of these black people living in this house, and not by choice, but by, I hate to say necessity either. It just, it really drove home the point that equal opportunity is not something that is available in this country, and there is a huge racial divide. And I guess, you know, when I was introduced to privilege, the notion of privilege for the first time, it sort of got my hair to stand on end. It was annoying, honestly, because I get that it is certainly, there are things that are easier for me as a white male, but it almost felt accusatory, like, oh, you're a white male, how dare you be that way, be born. And so I guess it's been better to be introduced to it in a more practical, real-life sense as opposed to an academic. We've never been financially secure, ever in our life, but we have also never been worried. I've never gotten the sense that we were truly worried about being in a bad place, right? So I guess that's the line for me, is we have grown up middle class, because that's what middle class is, I guess. You not worrying about being in a place you don't want to be.
Yeah.
Why do you think we're connected, Dorothy?
Well, because you're good and I'm good.
I love to hear you say that.
Equality. And you don't get equality by pulling people down to your level. You get equality by raising everyone up to the same level. And this is a big point. Every activism will always be secondary in my mind to the need to right the economic differentials in our society. The difference between gender, the difference between race are minuscule in the difference between economics and how someone of a high economic status is treated versus someone of a low economic status. The issue here is that disproportionately people of other races and genders are of a lower economic status. It's just the way society works. Because to be entirely honest, I don't think racism affects you as much if you're living in a mansion. And you never have to worry about your life, or where you're gonna, where your next meal's coming from, or whether your kids are going to college. So that is the part of privilege that I guess irks me the most, is that we focus so much on the things that don't matter as much, and don't understand that being white and male is not as important as being rich. I only have my, life's viewpoint to go from. Can't comment on the whole populace.
I was standing by my window on one cold and cloudy day. I saw that earth rolling for to take my loved ones away. The circle being broken by and by, Lord, by and by.
Look all around you, say look all around you. See all there is just to be alive about. Look all around you, please look all around you. See all there is just to being alive. Why life is more than our work, and our work is more than our job. Don't you know that our life is